Fascinating insight into what fires the creative imagination. Join me, John Wilson, for This Cultural Life on BBC News.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Armed soldiers have been offered to the Metropolitan Police after a large number of officers stepped back from firearm duties.
Touchdown. I repeat, EDO. FRC has touchdown.
And there you heard it, the NASA probe, which has spent the last 7 years flying through space, carrying the largest asteroid sample ever collected, touches down. Uncertainty surrounds the future of the UK's high-speed HS2 rail line. A senior cabinet minister says it would be crazy not to review the project amid rising costs. Security forces in Kosovo say they've killed 3 of the gunmen barricaded in a monastery after a policeman was killed in an ambush overnight. Hello, I'm Vishal Sripathma. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed to the BBC that it will provide the support of armed soldiers to the Metropolitan Police after a large number of firearms officers handed in their weapons. They turned in their firearms permits after an armed officer was charged with the murder of 24-year-old Chris Cabba, who was shot and killed in South London last year. Earlier, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, ordered a review of armed policing. Joe Inwood has this report.
Chris Cabba was unarmed when he was shot and killed in Streatham. He was driving a borrowed car. According to police, the vehicle had previously been linked to an incident involving a gun. Chris Cabba was hit by a single bullet, fired by a police officer. There was widespread outrage at his death, especially amongst London's black community. Last week, his family were in court to see a police officer who is only being referred to as NX121, charged with murder. They welcomed the prosecution, but it's been met with concern by many of the officer's colleagues. There are more than 6,000 police officers in the UK who are authorised to carry a firearm, and many of them work in London, in some of the most sensitive parts of the capital. Now, it's thought around 100 of them have said that they no longer want to carry a gun. One former officer says he's not surprised.
I was on armed response for 23 years. I was on VIP protection, and I hugely enjoyed the professionalism, the teamwork of it, and I would miss that. Would I put my weapon down today? Yes, I would hand it in. It's not worth it.
Announcing a review, the Home Secretary said police officers have to make split-second decisions under extraordinary pressures. They mustn't fear ending up in the dock for carrying out their duties. Officers risking their lives to keep us safe have my full backing. It has now been confirmed that the Army will be helping to fill the gaps, although only as a contingency. At a time when there are calls for increasing scrutiny on the police, especially when it comes to dealing with minority communities, there will be many who see this as an attempt to reduce accountability rather than a welcome reset. Joe Inwood.
Well, our correspondent Joe Inwood outlined a bit earlier on the significance of the MOD's statement of the support for the police.
To clarify, we shouldn't be expecting to see soldiers on the street. This is not a question of the army stepping in to do what, we would think of as everyday policing roles. They're not going to be arresting people. This will be a contingency service, contingency role. I spoke to the Ministry of Defence earlier, and what they were saying is that there are armed, as people would expect, there are armed teams that are ready to respond, for example, to a terrorist incident, a live shooter event, that sort of thing. And those sort of roles, the kind of in extremis roles, will be filled by the army if required. So I think we shouldn't get carried away in saying that the police are going to be replaced by the army. That's not the case. What we're seeing here is a contingency role for the army, but it is significant nevertheless.
And it's interesting because we heard from Suella Braverman, and in her statement there's clearly a lot of support there for the police.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I mean, here in the UK, we've been seeing a real debate at the moment over the last few years, as we have around the world, around the role of policing, and specifically the use of force, as some would see it, excessive force, against certain communities here in London, particularly the Black, the Afro-Caribbean community. And the debate really has been around whether the police are scrutinised enough. And what I thought was interesting about the statement from Suella Braverman today, the Home Secretary in the UK, was the fact that she was clearly saying that she supported the police. She thought that actually there was a problem here, that the police weren't being able to do their job because they're overly scrutinised. So I think we're going to be seeing a real tension here between the side of society that thinks that the police maybe don't always act in the best interest of all communities and of all people, and the other side which thinks that maybe law and order is more of a priority and would like to give their full backing to the police. And I think the Home Secretary has quite clearly stated in launching this review where she views the argument to lie, as it were.
Our correspondent Joe Inwood. A capsule containing asteroid samples which scientists hope could help explain how life on Earth began has successfully landed in the United States. A NASA spacecraft dropped the canister carrying just 250 grams of rock and dust from the surface of the asteroid onto the US state of Utah, as our science editor Rebecca Morrell reports.
On their way to recover a capsule that's travelled billions of miles through space. The conclusion of a 7-year mission called OSIRIS-REx. The first glimpse, a tiny dot high up in the atmosphere as it descends towards the Utah desert. Then a view of its parachute slowing the craft. Finally, it's down. Inside is the most precious sample, fragments of an asteroid called Bennu that could reveal the secrets of our solar system. The scientists think there's about 250 grams of dust and rock, and every grain is precious.
Some of our instruments literally look at the atoms that make up the crystals inside these rocks. And when you're working at that scale, a single stone is an infinite landscape to explore. We'll be working on these materials for decades and decades into the future.
All of this effort is to solve the mystery of what asteroid Bennu is made of. This is vital because Bennu tops the list of NASA's most hazardous space rocks. So studying its makeup could help us to stop it, if we ever need to. But it could also reveal more about our origins. It's a perfectly preserved relic from the dawn of the solar system. This was the moment the sample was collected in a 5-second smash and grab, before it was safely stowed in the capsule for its return to Earth. The rock and dust will be divided up between scientists around the world, including the team at London's Natural History Museum.
We're all unbelievably excited to see what it's going to be made of. I mean, we've thought about it, we've talked about it, we've written papers about it, we've dreamt about what it's going to be, and finally we're actually going to see it and find out what it really is, which, yeah, at the moment we have no idea. So it's going to be just so exciting to open the canister and find out what's in there.
The main concern now is contamination. The team here in Utah don't want what's on the ground, the dirt, the dust, the microbes, to get mixed up with the bits of Bennu. It's vital that their invaluable sample is kept pristine.
She's taking an initial thermal reading of that SRC as we speak.
The race is now on to safely recover the capsule and bring it back to the military base. Opening it will be a painstaking and slow process taking several weeks. But scientists say the wait will be worth it. Rebecca Morrell, BBC News, Utah.
Well, I've been speaking with Dr. Meenakshi Wadhwa, a planetary scientist at Arizona State University. She also serves as a principal scientist for the Mars Sample Return Programme. And I asked her about the process from here on.
This is going to be a very, very careful process of documenting the sample return capsule. They're going to be taking their time, before they open it up. They want to make sure that, the exterior is completely documented, that they remove any of the Utah dirt that might be attached to the capsule. And then, of course, they're taking some close-up pictures, some images of the capsule itself before they start to open it.
And in terms of dust, I mean, how much dust would something like this sort of meteorite carry?
Yeah, so this is actually, obviously samples from asteroid Bennu, and the estimate is that there could be as much as, 250 grams or so, perhaps even more, of sample from the asteroid Bennu inside this capsule, inside of the canister.
And that will take a while then to presumably navigate through and to extract?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, they're inside a makeshift clean room right at close to the landing site at the current time, but they will basically put it under nitrogen at some point and carry it to the Johnson Space Center, hopefully tomorrow. And that's where it's going to be taken apart very, very carefully.
Now, people might not have been aware of this going on in terms of the significance of this programme. Can you just explain a little bit about the magnitude of what's at stake here?
No, this is an incredible achievement. I mean, this is, of course, the very first sample return from an asteroid by the United States. There have been 2 other sample returns from the Japanese Space Agency before this, but they brought perhaps about a teaspoonful of asteroidal materials back. And we're hoping, we're going to get close to a teacup full or so of samples from this one. And, it's from an asteroid that's thought to be very carbon rich, that may have other volatiles like water, et cetera, in the material. And we're hoping to learn something about the very beginnings of our solar system, the very beginnings perhaps of life on our planet, whether materials like Bennu could have contributed to the complement of organics and volatiles on the early Earth that contributed to the origin of life on our planet.
That was Dr. Meenakshi Wadhwa speaking to me a bit earlier on, and we hope to speak to our correspondent in Utah a bit later on. Some UK news now, and the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says it would be crazy not to look again at the rising cost of the HS2 rail project. Now, a decision on whether the government will scrap the Birmingham to Manchester section of the line is expected this week. Noor Nanji has this report.
It's a grand project first dreamt up in 2009. The aim, to speed up journey times and create more capacity. But HS2 has faced delays, cuts and spiralling costs. The original plan would have connected London to Birmingham and then Leeds and Manchester. In 2021, the section from Birmingham to Leeds was cancelled. Now there's speculation the line might end in West London rather than going all the way to Euston. And the Birmingham to Manchester bit is in doubt as well. The last official estimate on HS2 costs, excluding the cancelled Eastern section, added up to around £71 billion, although that was in 2019 prices. £22.5 billion has already been spent on the London to Birmingham leg, while just over £2 billion has been spent on preparing for the other sections. This morning, the Defence Secretary and former Transport Secretary said no decision has been taken yet, but that it's important to respond to the budgets.
Every government has to look at the overall budgets and then make serious decisions which go beyond the sort of back and forth in a studio like this. Okay. To say, is this affordable under current circumstances? I'm absolutely confident, for example, that when those statements were made, no one knew we'd be in a war in Europe right now. With all of the consequences, all of the costs and all of the inflation. Of course, and any government that doesn't go back and then look at it is crazy.
Labour's been accused of sending mixed messages on HS2.
We are supportive of HS2 being built, but we're responding to rumour and leak. And look, Victoria, this is a really important infrastructure project. What I say on your show matters because we, the Labour Party, hope to be in government next year. We're not going to make decisions about national infrastructure projects that involve tens of billions of pounds without all of the information being available.
This weekend, business groups and political voices have been lobbying the government not to truncate HS2 further, with pressure mounting for decisions to be made. Noor Nanji, BBC News.
Live now to Councillor Bev Craig, who's Labour leader of Manchester City Council and also board member of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. Thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, your reaction to those comments from Grant Shapps.
So I would say we are responding just at rumour. So as the leader of Manchester City Council, and I know the Mayor of Greater Manchester is the same position, no one in government has approached us as a city to talk about their plans. Now, of course, you would expect a government of the day to be looking closely to how they're spending their money. But what I would say is this once in a generation opportunity to invest in infrastructure to the north, from the south, for people travelling both ways, for much needed capacity on our line, is something that can't simply be brushed aside. And of course, money needs to be managed, but this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to improve the capacities of our railway. So I would urge the government really, really strongly firstly, to meet with us, to tell us what they're thinking, but secondly, not to make short-term decisions that will have long-term damage to our economy.
And how do people feel about HS2 in the area that you work in?
So obviously I lead Manchester, and Manchester is the last leg. We've always argued that perhaps you could have started in Manchester and worked south, and perhaps we wouldn't be in this situation. What people in Manchester and people across the north regularly experience is railways that are outdated. Our railway station was built 200 years ago in the centre of Manchester, and it still stands there. Outdated railways that are really struggling with capacity.
Well, apologies for that. I think we've just lost connection to Bev, Councillor Bev Craig there, and we might bring you a bit later on. Anyway, let's go back to one of our stories, one of our lead stories, looking at the asteroid that's landed in Utah, which is hoping to tell us a bit more about how life began here on planet Earth. And we can cross now to our science correspondent, Jonathan Amos, who's in Utah for us. Jonathan, what an exciting few hours for you. Describe for us those moments when that asteroid landed safely and scientists now are investigating and their work begins now.
Yeah, Vishala, it's been quite an amazing day. I hope you can hear me because just off to my right here, the helicopters that went in and recovered the capsule just about to take off again, so they're going to be a little bit noisy for a while, but I'll try and make out some of the scenes that we saw today. Yes, we saw this capsule come screaming into the atmosphere of planet Earth, you know, moving at 12 kilometers a second, over 27,000 miles an hour. And first of all, they picked it up on these heat-seeking cameras, and then we got a view of a parachute and a capsule slung beneath it, and then it landed gently in the Utah desert here. Actually landed a little bit earlier than we were expecting. We were expecting it to come down at 08:55 local time, and it came down 3 minutes earlier than that. Now that'll be something that the engineers of the capsule at Lockheed Martin will want to pore over, but I don't think the scientists care very much. They have their capsule back and they've got their sample back.
And Jonathan, we saw pictures earlier on of what they call the clean room, I believe, in which we saw sort of men and women in white suits carefully examining this capsule, because it's quite tricky work to recover what it is that they're after. We're seeing pictures of that room now on our screens.
Yeah, the watchword today has been cleanliness. These samples are precious. They tell us about the chemistry that existed 4.5 billion years ago when the planets were forming around the nascent sun. And what we need is to see that chemistry uncontaminated. If we think, as the scientists suspect, there's chemistry in there that may give us clues about how life started on Earth, well, it's no use looking at that chemistry if it's been muddied with Earth dirt, with microbes, or the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere, which might have come in and started to oxidize compounds. So they need a pristine sample. So the idea was to bring the capsule back to a temporary clean room here. It's just over my shoulder here, about 1 kilometer's distance away. And in a moment they're disassembling the capsule to try and get it into a box purged with nitrogen. So nitrogen will not react with anything in that capsule. And then they can move it probably tomorrow down to the Johnson Space Center in Texas, which is where NASA keeps all of its archived materials. All of the moon rocks that came back during the Apollo program are kept at the Johnson Space Center. They have a dedicated clean room there, and what are they called? Glove boxes. You've probably seen them in movies and on the television. You've got these sort of rubber gloves, and you put your hands in, and then you can manipulate stuff under a sterile enclosed box. And they will just kind of look at the chemistry, and it'll take them certainly a few weeks to have a first take, to say how much sample they have and what the bulk composition is. And then the material will be spread to scientists across the world, and they will come back within 2 years with some detailed study. But I should say 75% of what's come back today is going straight in the archive. And the idea of that is that future scientists, some who are not even born today, working in labs that are not even built today, using instrumentation that hasn't been invented yet, will be able to study this material in the future.
Exciting stuff. Thank you very much. Jonathan Amos, our science correspondent there in Utah. I believe you probably have to take cover soon. Thank you very much for joining us. Security forces in Kosovo say they've killed 3 of the gunmen who attacked officers overnight in the mainly ethnic Serbian north. A siege is continuing at a monastery where the attackers are holed up. It follows an ambush against police that killed 1 and injured at least 1 other. And we can go live now to our Balkans correspondent, Guy Delorney. Guy, what's the latest? We believe that there's a presser on right now with the President of Serbia.
Indeed, that's correct. President Aleksandar Vučić of Serbia has been speaking. But before I get into that, I should say that the reports that we're hearing now from North Kosovo, from the monastery itself, is that the armed men have left the monastery, and that inside the monastery now we have Kosovo police and also the EULEX, which is the EU's special rule of law mission in Kosovo. So those authorities are now inside the monastery. The armed group isn't there. Kosovo's authorities say that they've arrested 6 people in connection with the attack, and they say that 3 more people were killed, as well as the police officer who was killed in the early hours of Sunday morning. So that's happening right now. Also, what's happening right now, as you say, Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić speaking about today's events, and he's saying that it's one of the most difficult days for our country since 2004 and 2008, 2004 being when there was a great forced displacement of ethnic Serbian people in Kosovo, 2008 when Kosovo unilaterally declared its independence from Serbia, and he's saying that he was waiting to see what had happened before he made any comments. And he says, "I don't want to justify the killing of an Albanian policeman, nor is it possible to justify it. That is absolutely reprehensible."
Guy, it's interesting that he should refer to this in terms of the context of when it was such a huge travesty for his country in terms of the displacement of the Serbians, and the fact that he's referred to that event as the last sort of big kind of moment for Serbia. Is this a reflection of sort of simmering tensions, perhaps, in the country?
The tensions have been simmering for a long time now, specifically with the ethnic Serb minority in North Kosovo and with the authorities in the capital Pristina, who are majority ethnic Albanian. Now, this has been considerably worse in the past few months since a number of events in Kosovo, and this involved the forced installation of ethnic Albanian mayors in these majority Serb areas in North Kosovo. And we've seen a number of violent incidents, and we've seen tensions very high indeed. President Vučić, in this address to the country that he's just been making, says that he's been warning for many weeks now that something like this might happen, that ethnic Serbs in North Kosovo might take matters into their own hands. So this seems to be a way of trying to distance Serbia, or as Pristina has put it, official Belgrade, from any connection with this armed group, which seems to have carried out this attack on Kosovo police units in the early hours of Sunday morning, resulting in the death of a police officer.
OK, Guy, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us, our Balkans correspondent, Guy Delorney there. Ethnic Armenian refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh have started arriving in Armenia. Over 300 now have crossed the border. Azeri forces retook the disputed territory last week in a military operation. This comes as Azerbaijan said it would reintegrate Karabakh Armenians, while local media in the enclave predicted a mass exodus of them. Nagorno-Karabakh is a territory in the mountainous South Caucasus of Eastern Europe and Asia, between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. It's recognised internationally as part of Azerbaijan, but large areas of it have been controlled by ethnic Armenians for decades. This week, after Azerbaijan launched a military offensive in Nagorno-Karabakh, a ceasefire was declared. The agreement was that Karabakh's military forces would be completely disarmed and disbanded, but now there are concerns over the fate of ethnic Armenians living in the area who say that aid has not been going through to them. Well, our correspondent Natalia Zotov is in the Armenian border town of Garis and sent us this update.
The town of Garis is the closest one to the border. The road from Karabakh to Armenia goes through here. That's where all the international observers and the people from Red Cross are accumulating, but they don't have much luck getting into Karabakh. This morning, several ambulances left for Stepanakert, they are expected to return with the wounded. Meanwhile, today, first few people were led through the border to Armenia. They have been put into a refugee camp, but for now they are only letting through women and children and not letting any men. We came across 19 trucks of humanitarian aid here in Garis. The drivers told us that they have waited 2 months on the border trying to get the humanitarian aid through to the Karabakh people. Now they are losing hope, so they return to the town. Talking to us, the drivers accused the Azerbaijan authorities and Russian peacekeepers of deliberately starving the people of Karabakh. The drivers didn't want to talk on camera, but they were eager to show us the contents of the trucks so that no one would accuse them of trying to smuggle weapons. Inside there were noodles, sugar, boxes of first aid medication. Meanwhile, in Yerevan, people are protesting, demanding the humanitarian corridor to be opened for everyone who wants to leave. That's what all people in Armenia are waiting for, but it hasn't happened yet.
Grammy Award-winning R&B star Usher is to headline the world-famous American football Super Bowl halftime show. Sponsors Apple Music shared a video called Usher Has a Confession, in which the singer confirms he will star in the 2024 event in Las Vegas in February. Say all this here on BBC News.
Hello there. Low pressure is going to be bringing some wet and windy weather conditions during Sunday across the Republic of Ireland, the United Kingdom, with this zone of heavy rain and strong winds then moving into Norway and Sweden over the next 24 hours. We've got an upper area of low pressure that's going to be drifting southwards, bringing thunderstorms from the Balkans into central and southern parts of Italy, and increasingly those storms working into parts of Greece as well as we go through Monday. So some of the storms are going to be really quite heavy in nature, could bring some localised surface water flooding. The weather sunnier and warmer further west for Spain, for Portugal, some reasonable temperatures there for central and southern parts of France. Still quite windy for the United Kingdom, but we'll see wet and windy conditions pushing northwards across Norway, Sweden and reaching parts of northern Finland as we go through Monday. Heading into Tuesday, there's another weather system coming in off the Atlantic affecting the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, so more wet and windy weather in the forecast here. But at the same time, for France, we've got some warm sunshine, temperatures climbing in Paris with highs of 25. Still looking at fine weather for Spain, Portugal and northern parts of Italy as well. The outlook over the next few days, in Madrid it stays sunny and warm then for much of the week ahead, with temperatures reaching the high 20s, very pleasant spell of weather. In Kyiv, also very warm for the time of year, with temperatures staying into the mid-20s.
Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
To wake up to a sunny day dozens of times a year and to be able to enjoy the blue scenery in your city is an opportunity. As you live in the center of global commerce with an international community is an opportunity. Reaching the East and the West simultaneously, benefiting from special business incentives is an opportunity. Life is full of opportunities. Seize this one. Istanbul Financial Center.
Stories of success, stories of failure, stories of strength, stories of corruption, stories of hope, stories of despair, stories of optimism, resilience, achievement, triumph. Remarkable stories from different places around the world. Join us for a series of stunning award-winning documentaries. Why Stories on BBC News.
This is BBC News, the headlines. Armed soldiers have been offered to London's Metropolitan Police after a large number of officers stepped back from firearms duties. Their decision is linked to a case of a police officer charged with a man's murder.
We are touchdown. I repeat.
And there you heard it, the NASA probe, which has spent the last 7 years flying through space, carrying the largest asteroid sample ever collected, touches down. Police in Kosovo have ended a standoff with Serb gunmen at a monastery which followed a deadly attack on ethnic Albanian police. And questions surround the future of the UK's high-speed HS2 rail line. Speaking to the BBC, Senior Cabinet Minister Grant Shapps says it would be crazy not to review the project amid rising costs and inflation.
From e-commerce, new developments and products to gadgets and games, and for everyone interested in the internet and new media. Now on BBC News, all the tech to revolutionise business and personal life. It's Click.
This week, Nick looks at Meta's latest project to help people make sense of the horrors of the past.
This is more than bringing back a dead person. This way, you can make that person, give them 1,000 years of life.
Can smartphone apps really provide an effective alternative to hormonal contraception?
It tells you when you're not fertile and when you're fertile.
And open wide,
Alistair will take you through now.
Alistair's taken a trip to the dentist to look at a device that may help prevent, well, further trips to the dentist.
I think there's a misconception that once decay starts, it has to end up in a cavity. But if we can identify that early white spot, then we can start to get the tooth to reform.
In the centre of London, there is a building like no other. An empty space where the public can sit, relax, and look up. I have to say, of all the giant LED screens I've seen in my time, this one's right up there. I mean, it's literally right up there.
Well, yes, and it seems like it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And it also makes you feel rather dizzy looking at it.
This is Outernet, the largest digital exhibition space in Europe. Here an array of artist work is displayed in its full panoramic glory.
Aside from the huge cube that spun Lara out, you were okay in the end, weren't you?
I was.
Good. There are a few other spaces dotted around too, which are used to showcase specific exhibits.
This room celebrates the role that women from all backgrounds have played in shaping the creative industries. And it's just one example of immersive technology bringing us closer to the events of today and the past. But some events are hard to face, even though it's important to do so. And one of the most important is the Holocaust. It's now been many decades since its horrors took place. And as time goes on, fewer survivors are around to be able to tell their stories.
For a while now, researchers have been documenting them digitally so their legacy can live on for future generations. And of course, there are now new ways to breathe new life into those memories. And Nick Queck has been to Meta in Berlin to find out more.
A stone's throw from the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, I've come to Meta's offices to try out its latest extended reality project. I'm the first journalist from outside Germany to see the new interactive Holocaust education tool. Tell Me Inge takes users on an audiovisual journey into the memories of Inge Auerbacher, a survivor of the Nazi regime. You ask Inge questions by simply talking, and the artificially intelligent system will play out her response.
Tell me about the terrible journey.
One morning, when I was 7.
It's her real recorded answer, not a digitally doctored version.
Oh, Inge's showing me something. She's opened up a box.
But it's presented to you like you're inside a video game, a moving storybook with your environment changing around you as Inge recounts more anecdotes and details from her past.
That's pretty cool. So she's opened a book and then we can see floating up over her right-hand shoulder the book.
It's a joint project with Hollywood startup Storyfile, which is now moving beyond computer screens and is stepping into uncharted virtual territory.
It's a little bit tense in this space, I have to say. It feels a bit eerie. I feel quite nervous about it all. My hands are sweating a bit, but it also is great to kind of see her stories come to life in this way. It makes you focus more on what she's saying. In a strange way, you're almost being entertained.
The experience was made in partnership with UNESCO, Claims Conference and World Jewish Congress.
You can take the story wherever you want to take the story. You can ask in whatever order you want to ask. I mean, you can't really ask for something more engaging at this point than that. You know, we used to sit in memorial museums and kind of read the text and be told some of the stories behind them, but this is a completely different level.
There are 2 Nazi guards at the gate.
Yet so far away, there was absolutely almost no chance to get out.
It's really sad. Wow. Is there a fine line, though, when it comes to design an experience where you want to make it engaging, but maybe not too immersive?
You shouldn't overwhelm someone emotionally. And I think especially because of this, we decided to use 3D animations. It makes things real, but it's not realistic. And so you get a sense of what was going on. And of course, you hear from Inge firsthand, but still, you know, there's some sort of a distance because it's not like that you see real soldiers, not like that you see real people getting hurt, and so on and so on. But you understand how the scenery was looking like.
I've been working on genocide and Holocaust commemoration issues for many years. These topics are not easy. The immersive part of it really, you know, makes you also feel like you're part of the life of the people, and seeing Inge where she is today and seeing that there is a life for survivors and how she made a life for herself and how strong she is also part of, you know, the positive part of experiencing this.
Thanks so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to meet you. Have you got to try the experience yourself? Have you seen what you look like in virtual reality?
Yeah, I look pretty good. I was satisfied. When you read a book, sometimes you would like to speak to that person in the book, to converse with that person, but you can't. You have to continue reading. And I think this way, this new method, gives you this insight.
Unfortunately, you can't ask Inge any old question. It has to be in some way connected to answers that she originally recorded. But what's really clever here is how the application expands once you get to know Inge more.
Her granddad's just popped up there.
As your curiosity peaks and you come back to Inge after the first story has been told, you find there's a sequel to that, some follow-up that you can then ask about, which then takes you on this journey and these branches through her life. And that's how we structured this, not as a linear storytelling. We're not watching a movie. We are actually delving into her life and allowing, just as we would do in conversation, different aspects of that life to unfold as we talk to her.
Right now, you can only hear from Inge in English and German, but down the line, Stephen says using AI, she could be translated into various languages so everyone can access it.
What was the experience like being in the studio, being asked all these questions?
I don't know. I'm a talker. I don't mind answering anything. Because when I'm gone, I'm gone. It's finished. History is gone. This is more than bringing back a dead person, you know, because that's not possible. But this way, you can make that person, give them 1,000 years of life. I think that's wonderful.
Over the years, we've covered the highs and the lows
A lot of lows.
of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, there are plenty of people who still hope that these unregulated digital currencies will replace traditional payments for goods and services. But the reality is you still can't buy much with crypto, which leaves it mainly as a high-risk investment.
Yes, crypto assets are notoriously volatile in value.
Get this, according to one report, hackers have already got their hands on $200 million this year alone.
So if you do hold crypto assets, what can you do to reduce those risks? Cyber correspondent Joe Tidy's been taking a look at crypto wallets.
It's estimated there could be as many as 400 million people around the world who hold cryptocurrency. But it's thought a tiny fraction, around 8 million, are securing their coins offline to protect from crypto hackers or companies collapsing. Remember FTX? It's been nearly a year since that imploded, and still 1 million people are missing their coins. The safest way to protect your crypto is with a hardware wallet, which is, oddly, a physical device. So, let's see for ourselves then. Just how hard is it to take Bitcoin from an exchange and put it onto a hardware wallet, like this? The idea of a hardware wallet is very simple. It holds the private keys to your digital wallet, making you your own bank, just as crypto's inventors envisaged. With the keys stored safely off the internet on a physical device, your coins are safe. I've got hold of one of the most popular ones to test it out. So, I've got to go to the Trezor website and I've got to download their software. You've got to make sure, of course, that you put in the right web address, because this will be a prime time. I imagine that hackers and scammers will want to get you to go on their fake Trezor website or fake Ledger website and hand over your Bitcoin by mistake. Then you have to plug in cables and install some firmware. So far, so good. Okay, so now it's telling me that I need to create a backup for my crypto wallet, and it's giving me some randomly generated words, which are my seed phrase. And weirdly, it's asking me to write them down. This so-called seed phrase allows me a way back to my currency if I lose or break the hardware. So this feels like a really analog way of securing my crypto. I've got this hardware wallet, which I've obviously, they cost money, a lot of money, but then they've just given me a pen and paper. Now is the potentially tricky bit. I need to somehow get my coins from the exchange, in this case Binance, one of the most popular in the world, onto this wallet. I had a feeling this would be where it gets tricky. How do you get your money off the exchange? Okay, so I've got a QR code now for my new wallet, so I'm going to scan that with the app. Invalid, right. Okay, so what do I do now? After a bit of good old-fashioned online troubleshooting, we're in. It's a bit worrying this moment because, of course, I've had this cryptocurrency for years and years. There's not much there, but just sort of trusting the process. So here we go. I'm going to click on withdraw. Just have to wait. Hope it worked. Now, that was stressful and complicated, but I'm now my own crypto bank. No one has access to my little stash apart from me, but it's also a lot of pressure. It's just such a different experience from internet banking, for example, where you send money from one person to the next and it keeps you informed of all the process, but it's not intuitive at all. I can see why the process is daunting to the vast majority out there choosing to take the easier route and just hope that their coins stay safe online. As is always the case with crypto, it's a gamble.
There's a path right where you are. Now insert the cargo. Where do we go from here? Anywhere you like.
To wake up to a sunny day dozens of times a year and to be able to enjoy the blue scenery in your city is an opportunity. As you live in the center of global commerce with an international community is an opportunity. Reaching the East and the West simultaneously, benefiting from special business incentives is an opportunity. Life is full of opportunities. Seize this one. Istanbul Financial Centre.
Download the BBC News app now and get the latest headlines as they happen. Personalise your app to learn more about the stories you care about. Stay up to date. Download the BBC News app.
Now, there's been a recent explosion of misinformation on social media, encouraging women to ditch hormonal contraception due to fears about side effects. And influencers are promoting the use of apps to prevent pregnancy instead.
Investigative journalist Katie McAviney has been meeting women who've used these apps with a very mixed bag of results.
Let's take control of our fertility.
So-called natural alternatives to hormonal contraception are everywhere on social media, from the fertility awareness method to period tracking apps.
This is my birth control.
One popular app is called Natural Cycles. With 2.5 million registered users, it sells itself as digital contraception. The company behind it says it is 93% effective with typical use, the same they say as the pill. And influencers advertise it a lot.
This is my app.
Okay. For Amelia, it's worked for 5 years. She tracks her fertility by measuring her temperature.
You press the button. So you just put it under your tongue and you wait for it to beep. Like that. And it'll tell you what your temperature is. So you put in your temperature for the day. If you're sick, it could change your temperature, obviously. Like if you didn't sleep very well, if you're hungover, then it kind of like discounts your temperature for that day.
That's something that I would really worry about. Like if you have a long lie or you're hungover, it would affect how accurate it is.
Yeah, which it definitely does. So it like rules out that whole temperature for that day. Okay. It tells you when you're not fertile and when you're fertile. So when it says not fertile, it's safe to have unprotected sex. If it changes to red, that means you need to be more careful and use a condom if you're having sex. It's made a big difference in that I'm not reliant on a hormonal pill every day that could mess with my mood. It does take a lot of work on your part to get used to taking your temperature, inputting it in the app.
It works for Amelia, but does it work for everyone?
Hi.
Meet Penelope, Matilda's much loved but very unexpected baby girl.
Boo.
Matilda tried the pill, the injection and the coil, but none of them suited her.
I went back to the doctors and within like a couple of weeks I felt back to myself again, but was of course like suffering with my periods still. I didn't want to go on any hormonal contraception. I don't feel like anything's suiting me. I've been doing this for like 8 years at this point, from like 12 to 20, where I'm either bleeding all the time or not bleeding or suffering and in pain, and they just kind of turned around and said that there wasn't really anything that you could do to help with that. At this point I'm like 22, in a relationship, but by no means at a point where I'm ready to like try for a baby or have a family.
She says she found Natural Cycles advertised on social media and followed the app's instructions immediately.
I just saw, I think green and red, most people think if you sat at a traffic light, red means stop, green means go. I assumed the fact I'd entered my data meant that they knew enough about my body and my cycle that I could be having unprotected sex. I had been using it from the December, and by the January I'd found out that I was pregnant. It just wasn't something I think I was quite ready for at the age I was maybe. Obviously I've come to terms with it and I love it now, but it was definitely a massive shock.
Natural Cycles says the app is effective from day one, and that it will only give you green days when it has enough data to do so.
I think effective from day one is like a very bold statement to make. I think the app putting something forward that after 6 months you can be having a happy and hormone-free life, that would be a better statement to make than saying it's effective to day one, but that was definitely what attracted me to the app in the first place. It's been such a challenge, but obviously one of the best things ever. She's been brilliant.
For someone who maybe getting pregnant today wasn't quite the plan, but if it happened, it would still be a happy surprise, then methods that are a bit less effective, like the period apps, can be great for them. But for somebody who really doesn't want to be pregnant, actually ditching potentially a very effective method of contraception for an app that requires a lot of user input and might be less effective is really worrying.
Natural Cycles told us that no method of contraception is 100% effective, even when used perfectly. In a statement, it said less than 1 in 100 women become pregnant due to the algorithm assigning a green day when a user is fertile, and the method's real-life effectiveness is the same as its published rates.
Okay, we're going to stay with health now. What is one thing that we should all do quite regularly, but which most people don't enjoy doing?
Go to the dentist.
Yes. What is the thing the dentist tells me to do more of every time I go?
Flossing.
And what do I then not do for the next 6 months?
Flossing.
Correct.
And for anybody who doesn't do their flossing properly like him, well, a new device that Alistair Keane has been to find out about could come to the rescue. It aims to identify decay before it causes a problem. You got something stuck in your tooth there?
We've all been here, the long wait to see the dentist.
Alistair, we'll take you through now.
Not always people's favourite place to be. Thankfully, I'm not here for treatment, but to see the latest tech that could revolutionise detection of decay and allow changes to be made before it gets so bad you need a filling.
So this is the new Calspers technology that we're talking about. Basically, it's a specialised intraoral camera that's capable of actually visualising tooth decay really as it's happening live. So it uses bioluminescence to be able to see calcium ions coming off a tooth surface, which is a marker of active disease.
The inspiration for that process started somewhere unusual, deep in the sea, and bioluminescence in fish.
It's a completely new form of dental imaging. If you think about radiographs, for example, X-ray, that's about giving you a snapshot of damage that's already happened to a tooth surface. Now, what our technology does is it allows you to see whether that decay is happening on the day that you're looking at that tooth surface. So it's giving you information about what's going to happen in the future, rather than just what's happened in the past.
Because of that, this device can identify the decay at such an early stage, it's possible to reverse it with cleaning, meaning you won't have to go under the drill.
So in here we have a syringe that holds the photoprotein, which is the active component that gives off light when it comes in contact with calcium on the tooth.
And as it's being applied to the tooth, there's a camera?
Yes, so at the end here there's a camera, can give you a live video feed while you're positioning and then capture the still images when the photoprotein's applied.
You've got some fake teeth somewhere that we can have a go with.
So at the moment you're getting a live video feed showing on the computer, and that's used just for positioning to make sure you're getting the tooth centered in the image. When you press the button, you'll hear a click. That's the photoprotein being applied to the tooth, and you get an image of the light coming from the photoprotein showing where there is tooth decay. So if you look at this one here, this is low-level caries. So the light blue in here is showing where there's calcium ions coming from this fissure pattern. And this is the kind of level that we're really aiming at detecting. So this is where you could do something about it. You could reverse this process and prevent this becoming a cavity.
Back in the dental surgery, and dentists like Leanne can see the impact this device could have on dental care.
I think there's a misconception that once decay starts, it has to end up in a cavity, and it's not always a big gaping hole. It starts with a small white lesion on the tooth, and then it'll progress to brown, and then eventually, because it forms from the inside out, it'll start to cavitate in, and that's most of the time when the patient becomes aware. But if we can identify that early white spot, then we can start to get the tooth to reform and to rebuild.
But Leanne and dentists in other parts of the world will have to wait a little longer for this tech. The company are going to launch in America first, early next year.
We'd really like to see it become standard of care. The move from the drill fill paradigm through to a more preventive approach to dentistry is, I mean, it's ongoing, and we think our technology is part of enabling that move towards a more preventive dentistry.
Lots of people are nervous about going to the dentist. What would you say to someone that maybe is quite nervous about this tech?
I think it's about the overall environment, the overall treatment environment, and the way that the practice sets themselves up. Because if the patient knows everything that the dentist is trying to do for them is about avoiding cutting into a tooth, you know, it's almost a sort of before and after. So here is a problem that you have currently. We're going to do the following. 3 months' time, 6 months' time, we're going to follow up, and we're going to show you that we've essentially turned off that activity.
With that reassurance, I couldn't resist a chance to get my own teeth checked out. They were fine, but I probably should remember to floss more.
That was Alistair, and that's it from Outernet.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
And there's more from the Click team at bbc.com/click.
This is an era driven by data-first modernization, made for those who push beyond the usual barriers towards a new future. HPE GreenLake brings the cloud to you, securely connecting data wherever it lives, edge to cloud, putting you in control of fast-forwarding your multi-generational IT. This is intelligence unlocked, opportunities opened, hybrid cloud your way. HPE GreenLake.
Правозащитники подложили телефон, и получился момент, что моя мать выходила в сарай, открываются ворота, и она видит людей каких-то, которые остановили машину, и правозащитники сделали вид, что они там потеряли дорогу, что они там по телефону разговаривают, что такое. И я помню, как отец сразу же забегает наверх, открывает дверь, там ли я, а я просто смотрю на него и такая спрашиваю, что случилось, как будто бы я ничего не знаю, все хорошо. Я ждала, пока они вернутся из сарая, чтобы сказать предлог, мне нужно там покормить барана. Там я вышла на улицу, бешено бьется сердце, я сую руку, там где-то, где фары, и я нащупываю там пакет. Сразу беру его, засовываю в платье, возвращаюсь обратно с невозмутимым видом, говорю, что там мне надо идти в ванную, я захожу в ванную, запираюсь, просто сажусь на пол и договорились бежать.
We are there to report and bear witness. My coping mechanism was to not think further than an
the way that I covered the story. That proclamation of a new king.
Stories. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Armed soldiers are offered to the Metropolitan Police after a large number of officers step back from firearm duties. A space capsule carrying the largest asteroid sample ever collected lands safely in Utah. Police in Kosovo have ended a standoff with Serb gunmen at a monastery, which followed a deadly attack on ethnic Albanian police. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed to the BBC that it will provide the support of armed soldiers to the Metropolitan Police after a large number of firearms officers handed in their weapons. They turned in their firearm permits after an armed officer was charged with the murder of 24-year-old Chris Cabba, who was shot and killed in South London last year. Earlier, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, ordered a review of armed policing. Joe Inwood has this report.
Who knows loads about the food of this region.
You want me to help? Sure, thank you.
Year at Buckmore Park, unbeaten, won every single race. A lot of these guys he was beating just on pure natural.
Let's go, guys. Numbers are on the screen. We're machine 13, lucky number, proven number 9.
Yes. In terms of what was made on Wednesday, what those comments were made by the Prime Minister for you. Thank you very much for joining us. In terms of what was made on Wednesday, what those comments were made by the Prime Minister for you. Thank you very much for joining us. In terms of what was made on Wednesday, what those comments were made by the Prime Minister for you. Thank you very much for joining us. In terms of what was made on Wednesday, what those comments were made.
Opportunities in intellectual property and in products will be huge over the next 20 mental technologies. The export opportunities in intellectual property and in products will be huge over the next 20 mental technologies. The export opportunities in intellectual property and in products will be huge over